and welcome to Think Big. I am Akia Garnett, your host, and I'm excited about tonight's show. I am joined by my dear friend Monda, Raquel, Webb, and she's just amazing. She's everything from a film director to producer to playwright to anything you can think of that requires you to get an actual story from concept onto the big. We're going to be talking to Monda about her upcoming project, Red, and everything that's required to make this a great success. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Monda. Monda, how are you?
I'm just fine. I can't come into your house without bearing gifts.
Okay.
So, before we get down deep, I wanted to present you with Red Clay, Dirt, and Mountains.
Thank you so much.
My book of short stories is loosely based on my family history, but placed in historical context. And primarily, it just takes a look at how resilient we as human beings can be when it comes to adversity.
Wow. And how long did it take you to create this beautiful work of art? I can't wait to get my mind wrapped around all the characters and so forth.
Well, it took about a year with regard to some of the research that I had to do. Red Clay Dirt and is based on Dawson, Georgia, which is where my mother's born, and Mountains is based on Beckley, West Virginia, coal mining country, which is where my father was born. And this book is really an homage to them and the stories that they've told me growing up. And all of us have these great stories, right? And I just think it's so important that if we don't know those stories, if we have no idea where we came from, then we may not know where we're going, and we may not discover our destiny, because as far as I'm concerned, DNA is irrefutable and legacy is imminent.
Wow. And so, just for creating a book by itself, that's a huge deal. But storytelling, as you just said, is quite popular right now, not just in the form of being a public speaker and being able to share your story on stage to create, compelling messaging, but just the whole act of storytelling when it comes to script writing and actually getting something onto film that's believable, that's exciting, that draws some emotion, all of the things that are required to make it a good product. What's that project like for you?
Well, the interesting thing is that I just, in the last couple of years, I've gotten into screenwriting because I want to be able to share stories in a visual medium as well as a literary one. And when you're writing a book, you've got lots of real estate. You can describe something for 3 pages if you want to. But when you're working with a script, it is tight. And it is, for me, it's a beautiful challenge because it forces me to think very clearly. Film is an extremely visual medium. So as opposed to, writing 13 or 14 sentences, I have to ask myself, how can I convey this visually? Because it's all about images, right? And if you do a really good film, especially with the short, you can actually do the entire film without any dialogue if it's strong enough with the images, and then images can tell the story.
Wow. So, for this particular project, and just let's go back to the book and the story before we move over to the actual film, because just moving a book from a book to a film, is, of course, something that, especially when you have read the book and you then see the movie, you're wondering how do they actually decide what to keep or cut. So I do want to get to that, but regarding the actual story, tell us more about how you actually develop the storyline and everything that has to do with the characters.
Okay, so Red Clay, Dirt, and Mountains, there are 4 short stories. And the first short story takes place in Dawson, Georgia, 1939. Now, with regard to my family history, a white man was kind of messing around with one of my great uncles, and he killed him. So he left town and he changed his last name. And to this day, we kind of know them, but we're still kind of estranged from them. But it was to protect himself. I mean, this is the late 20s. In reality, it's the late 20s for something like this to happen. But the Ku Klux Klan came to my great grandfather's house looking for him and looking to take him. And there were only 2 houses on the land. And so my great aunt, who I guess she was around 11 or 12 at the time, helped to save the family from the Ku Klux Klan by going to get her grandfather, who's Paul Robinson, and he came through the cornfields, right? This is the country. And my great grandfather had a farm, which was very unusual even at that time from a historical perspective for black men to own farms. Many of them were sharecroppers. So he came from being a sharecropper to a landowner. So he ran through the cornfields, cocking a double-barrel shotgun, and was shooting it before he even got to where the Klan was. And so they left. I guess they didn't know how many people were coming through that cornfield. But if you think about the history of it, that could have really changed the trajectory of my family line to this day if it went down any differently. So the first story, Red Clay Dirt, is based upon a bitter, kind of broken northern woman and who spent her summers in the South. She travels south to bury her great-grandmother after 20 years. So she's a prodigal daughter of sorts. She trips over a tree root. She embodies the spirit of her great aunt, Aunt Rose, who ran through the cornfields. And when she comes, and she relives this. Yeah. So when she comes back to the present, she has to really think about where she's come from. And she realizes that in order for her to be whole, that she needs to embrace all of who she is and not be ashamed of any of her heritage. Yeah. And to scream loudly from the treetops. Wow. So she trips over a root to get to the root of her insecurities.
And so for the actual fictional part of this versus the the reality or the truth in it, how much of this was from imagination that you had to create versus those things that may have been stories passed down from your family?
Well, the premise of it, with a young woman saving the family from the KKK, that's the truth. The time period, I made it 1939 because I wanted to put it in historical context when Billie Holiday first sang Strange Fruit. Sure. I thought that was very important because that is, how visual is that? A strange fruit hanging from southern trees. And so, and one thing, interestingly enough, about Southerners, they keep stuff close to the vest. So, I did a little digging and, and I would even hear different versions. But when it was all said and done, that line, that's the line with which I created this particular story. Wow. The second story is about my great-grandmother, and she was booted out of the state of Georgia for trying to get black people to register to vote in Albany, Georgia. So she was sent to teach Indian kids, and they were sent off their reservations to come to this school to learn English, whatever, right? Yeah. And the sad thing, though, Akia, is that if the Indian children went home after years, they couldn't communicate with their parents because they couldn't speak the language anymore, or if they went home at all. So there's just so much history and intertwined in the history that I'm writing about. So eventually my great-grandmother did come back to Albany, but again, she just, for trying to do something that she felt was the right thing and something that you think is major adversity. How do you get past that? Yeah. And it takes a lot of strength. And I'm sure all of us have these amazing stories in our familial background that we can draw upon for our own strength.
I mean, and you must feel like a historian at at certain parts of the story writing process. I mean, you've got to go back and fact check to make sure these things are actually happening. Did you involve other historians who focus on those time periods?
Well, historians, if you can call family members historians, number one, to the extent that they remember. And the third story takes place in West Virginia in the coal mines. My grandfather got his foot cut off in the mines in a specifically a town only for coal mining, right? It was in East Gulf, West Virginia, and they called it a holler. And hollers have certain physical characteristics. They have to be about mountain, has to be water. So the thing was, in this town, all you could do was coal mine.
How'd your family get there in West Virginia? Do you know how they migrated there?
No, I don't. Okay. But yeah, they were there, and so the question is, after my grandfather got his foot cut off, how do I provide for my family? Women in coal mining towns were either sold themselves or they cooked in kitchens. So, but I had to do for that particular period. It's called Brothers of the Pick, and for that particular period, there was a time when white coal miners and black coal miners they mined 24 hours a day. They would have different shifts. But after a while, everyone worked together. Yeah. And you had Asians and Irish, all kinds of immigrants coming to work in these coal mines because it was kind of considered a boom industry, the promised land. But when it was all said and done, when everyone came up from their coal mine at the end of the day or night, whenever it was, everyone was the same color. So lots of research, especially when it came to union, being able to union, because a lot of deaths were, they had a lot of deaths in the coal mines. Yeah.
Did your family have any tragedies that you know of?
But with the exception of my grandfather, I don't think so. I mean, there were several generations of Webbs that worked in the coal mines for several years. I actually retired from them. So, but yeah, I had to do a lot of research because I wanted it to not only be as authentic as it could possibly be, but relatable and even educational to the extent where I've had people say, "Oh, I didn't know there were black coal miners."
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's something that's commonly talked about, actually.
So
that in itself is just, a nice little piece of information to share.
It is. And I just think it's extremely important to be able to tell the stories of the regular person, the regular people who built this country, blood, sweat, and tears, people who are salt of the earth, just like you and me. Their stories deserve to be told as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm fascinated over West Virginia and your family. Are they still there? Anybody still there?
Yes, I have an aunt there and a few cousins. My dad lives in Camden, Arkansas, but he goes home. We just talked the other day about being able to go home and so he can tell me more stories, so I can eventually write his biography, right, to share with the family and continue that line of storytelling.
What about story number 4? So you've shared 3 of them with us. What's the 4th part of that?
Well, story number 4 is primarily kind of a David versus Goliath story, and I kind of based it on my mom, who was taking public transportation during her working years, and the types of things that you see on the trains are definitely something that could be written about, right? But primarily it just takes a look at the infrastructure and how political Washington can be, and that if you're a nonprofit or if you have heart, how sometimes maybe that can win over the the political insiding and political inside trickery and all that stuff that goes on. It's really a story about humanity. So it's not necessarily based on a family story, but just kind of on the spirit of people who really just want to help other people. And I have a few other ideas about short stories that I would love to tell about people who grew up in Washington, lived 3rd and 4th generation Washingtonians, people in Baltimore. There's some really, really good stories out there.
Yeah.
I want to tell them all.
My grandmother, I remember going on a trip with her, and we were riding through North Carolina, and we saw these fields of red clay, dirt. And she started to tell me that, they used to eat them. They used to eat the red clay. And I just never forgot that. So when I saw this, I wondered how you actually named the project this in the first place. What does red clay dirt have to do with all of the 4 stories that are associated with the book?
Well, that's a good question. So the red clay dirt itself, if you go to our family land, it's off of a red clay dirt road. And I thought about not only that red clay dirt, but again, the red clay dirt roads that are all over America and the history associated with them, with the slaves and the blood of the slaves, and how that red clay dirt holds so many secrets, and those secrets that are begging to be told. So it just came naturally to me to name it Red Clay Dirt and Mountains. And so in the film Red Clay Dirt will show through lovely imagery how important that dirt is to who all of us are, really.
So you'll find a way to bring the symbolism of that into the actual movie.
Yes.
That's awesome. So for the actual book, how long did it take you to move that from these ideas in your mind? I'm sure you didn't start out with the 4 stories. You had to whittle that down, right? I mean, how long did it take you to get from there to having this nicely printed and bound, beautiful piece of work here?
A little under a year. And what was helpful, and to just share with you how I knew that I was on the right track. I had a dream one day, and I woke up with the woman's name in my head. I'm like, I don't know who this is, but it was persistent. So I Googled, we Googled, and I saw the name, and I clicked on it, and it took me to a Facebook page that had a story about the coffee, the egg, the carrot, and coffee, and the coffee bean. And the premise of the story is that a young lady was just kind of depressed. She goes to her mom. She's like, she's down and out. Her mother says, listen. She takes her to the kitchen, and she puts 3 pots to boil on the stove. And in one, she puts an egg. The other, she puts a carrot. And the other, she puts a coffee bean. So after about 15 minutes, the egg had boiled. And she says, baby, when you're faced with adversity, do you become hard and bitter like this egg? And then she picked up the carrot, because when the hot water hit the egg, it boiled it. She picked up the carrot. She says, when it comes to adversity, are you soft? Do you become, weak when faced with adversity, this hot water being the adversity? And then she looked at the coffee bean, and the coffee bean made coffee. So she asked her, which one are you? And I thought, oh my goodness, this is what Red Clay Dirt and Mountains is all about, that resiliency under adversity. All of us face it, but how do we come out of it? So then everything kind of started to flow. It's not as if I had true writer's block, but I think it just in terms of the organization and the stories, it just became extremely clear. So it took about a year. And I you know, as a self-published author, it was important for me to finish and have the book before Book Expo America.
Yeah.
And so I set that deadline. It's like the largest trade show for publishers in the United States. And, you know, and I was, you know, blessed and able to make it happen. But I had my first book signing at Sankofa bookstore.
Yeah.
A couple of doors down. And I just think it was poignant because of the Sankofa bird, you know, the feet are planted forward, but the head is faced backwards, as you have to get to that pass in order to move forward. And it just, everything just made sense.
Wow. You know? Isn't that beautiful when everything just aligns and you just know that you're on the right track?
It's divine. That's right. That's
wow.
Right.
So so then you've brought us forward very nicely in terms of the actual book and how you move that to execution. And now you've got this idea that you want to transition this into a film.
Yes.
And you've done another film before, so we'll talk about that one in a minute. But how did you make that decision to move this from such a wonderful and well-written piece, I'm sure, into something that people can behold on screen and interpret for themselves?
Well, you know, Akia, I've kind of grown weary with the choice, and we're not talking about in the last year, but previously the choice of movies and TV films that we've had to choose from. Either, you know, banging, ganging, you know, just snatching weaves. Sure. But I'm like, you know, where's the fences? Where's the Queen Sugars? Where's the green leaves? Right?
You're in the right time
fortunately,
frame.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I mean, we're getting real substance on the screen now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm very encouraged by that. But there is an appetite for it.
Yeah.
I mean, reality TV notwithstanding, I'm not knocking it. It's fine.
There's a place for it.
But I think that we're so diverse and we are so complex as a people, and we have so much to offer. And I had an opportunity to go to Spain to show you know, my short film last year. And when people see us, you know, I mean, hip hop is all over the world, but I'm like, if they're seeing these images, what about the real images? What about, you know, I remember when Cosby came out, the Cosby Show, and people were like, oh, that's not real.
Yeah, of course. It's real today now, but back then, you know, it was
not real.
Foreign to see a doctor married to a lawyer and both living in their nice brownstone. But
there's a history of that. Yeah,
there's a history of it, but it's so
before, in the 1800s. I mean, there's a history before, you know, Black Wall Street and Rosewood, before those cities were blown up and destroyed. There is Black progress and Black wealth. Yeah. So I'm going to tell these stories.
That's awesome.
So if I can, but you know, dream has to be financed. So we're you know, plugging away.
Well, I'm glad you led into finance, because creating a movie, of course, is quite expensive. How do you move to that whole fundraising process and being that cheerleader for your product, your program, your project? I mean, you are the biggest cheerleader for your film. How do you approach the whole fundraising concept?
Well, I tell you what, you can't do it alone, right? And it is good to, you know, I'm surrounded by people who have embraced the vision and they want to tell the story just as much as I do. So I think the biggest thing with crowdfunding is leverage, being able to kind of utilize the leverage that you have, the audience that, you know, I mean, because I've written and published a few books, then there's somewhat of an audience out there.
Sure.
But if you...
and are they hungry for you to do more things?
Yeah. Well, when is this coming out? When is that coming out?
That's
so
good.
There's a little hunger there.
Yeah,
right?
They're
not starving, but there's some hunger. But I think it's important that for anyone who attempts to do crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, which has gotten more popular over the years.
In the beginning, there was hardly anything. I mean, you could make a killing. But now it's, you know,
it's almost saturated, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, and I think it also depends on the subject matter, but there are platforms for artists specifically to go and, you know, say, can you, you know, donate to this campaign? But you have to have lists, you know, you have to have people that you approach beforehand, before you even launch, to know that you're going to get some kind of commitment. Yeah. Because there is something psychological in someone saying, oh, they're not close to their goal, and they may not feel as motivated to give. But if they see that, you know, you're out there and those numbers keep growing, they want to be a part of the win, you know. And it's hard work. It's like a campaign, political campaign.
Exactly. And you've you've been building this network of artists for a long time, though. I mean, I've been to some of your gatherings, and it gives a platform for people to share. Are you finding a lot of support in those networks that you had been, building over the years. Not, I don't know if you knew back then that you were going to move in this direction or not, but it's just amazing that you kind of have that network of resources.
Yeah, it's to an extent, yes, right. And you can't take anything for granted.
Sure.
You can't. Oh, just because this person bought 4 books doesn't mean that they. So, every person is different, but there is some. Well, I've liked what she's done, so let me continue to support her. But to your point, this does take a lot of money, and you have to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to have a pot, some money come from this particular direction, but I'm also going to need it coming from here, there, and other places, because with the type of money that has to be raised, you don't want to get donor fatigue.
Sure.
I mean, the campaign that I have going now, it's tax deductible because I'm working with a fiscal sponsor, but yet and still, you got to monitor that and just be careful that you don't always have your hand outstretched.
Yeah, totally.
And it takes about 7 years. They say it takes about 7 years to really raise enough money to do a film. So
wow.
I'm like, okay,
I think that's about right.
Truncate that, like half the time.
But most times we just see the end product. We see the glint, the lights and the trailers, but we don't see the timeline associated with how long that movie has been, promoted to even become something that people would pick up and finance. So thank you for sharing that. And regarding the whole filming process, how do you go about selecting your cast, finding executive producers who will also, put forth some financial resources for you, all sorts of things that, things like the dolly grip and the best boy grip and all of those. Yeah, I know. I read the credits, I don't know what all these people do in the movies, but I read the closing credits and I'm always, amazed at the various, complexities associated with the cast. Absolutely. How do you do all that?
Well, as an independent filmmaker, and trust me, the landscape is totally different if we were in Hollywood or in a studio someplace. But as an independent filmmaker, oftentimes you have to be the butcher, the baker, and a candlestick maker. So I've been blessed to be surrounded by with my producers and my director of photography, people who have been in the business for years, and they can help kind of guide me. But when it came to casting for the first film I did, Zoo Show, which I know we'll talk about, I actually I cast from Starbucks. I cast from the gym. My gym,
wow.
You
cast, saw someone and said that's this person, that's this character,
and it's it sounds crazy, but it's true. Now I do have a friendship with Kimberly Skirm. She's a casting agent out of Baltimore. And she actually said, Monda, you can come to my office. You can look through my files, non-SAG, actors, of course.
Sure.
And if anyone you find, feel free to give them a call and tell them that I sent them.
That was generous.
So I went up and I looked through the files and I spent several hours and I wanted to get people, everyone looks so shiny. And I'm like, gosh, for this particular project, I want regular people to just kind of look like me. And so I ended up getting one person from there, and he brought his father along. But other than that, it was, friends, family, word of mouth. And Kimberly, she cast for House of Cards. So she's been around, very good person. But I just found that I got a better performance from just people. I described the vision to them. They read the script. Yeah, and so their reactions, a lot of that was very natural, especially working with children. Yeah, that was.
So then, with the second book, Zoo, and I call it Zoo because I it's a long word and it's not English, right? So
not the only one.
I haven't heard some of those sounds in English, so I was like, I can read, but I don't think that's English. So tell us about Zoo, because it's just a heart-touching story. It's deep. And, you just focus on deep. So tell us about Zoo and how that all came about.
Oh, well, thank you. And I, I'm just a vessel, Akia. I saw, so the film is called Zoo Show. The Show is German, and primarily Volker, loosely translated, it means human zoo, right? The Volker stands for look, and the show is show. Look, so kind of like a peep show, right? So, the film it takes a look at a day in the life of an African girl on display for the first time in a human zoo at the World's Fair in Brussels, Belgium, 1958. And I took a look at a photo that I saw on Twitter, and I had a knee-jerk reaction to that photo. Not only did I not know about human zoos, it was 1958. I'm like, okay, my parents were 11.
Yeah, it's not that long
and it was
ago.
a lot of civil. It was a lot of stuff going on here in the U.S. in 1958. It wasn't too long before the Freedom Riders, and it was just a lot of stuff going on. And I said to myself, you can't tell me that these Europeans didn't know what Africans look like. And so I did a lot of research. And there's not too much out there on the human zoo. And, people have asked, oh, was it freak shows?
Yeah.
No. They were folks that looked just like you and me. And they're very popular in the late 18th, early 19th centuries. Like over 1 billion people paid to go see these ethnographic expeditions even here in the United States.
Yeah.
So, but generally a rich patron would pay an explorer to go and bring back, it was like a grocery list, bring back 5 men, 4 women, 2 pregnant women, 12 children.
Wow.
And then they would recreate, and wherever they would go. So they had human exhibits from Asia and indigenous peoples and bearded people. So it wasn't just Africans.
Sure.
The issue with the Africans is that the Europeans began to assert their perceived superiority and saying, oh, we're better than them. This is right around the age of imperialism. They're low to the ground. They're black. You know what? They're monkeys. And for extra, they even had display for extra shillings if you touched one of them. If you paid extra, you could touch the human exhibit. So the film itself is a lot softer than the actual truth was. But, the explorers would bring the people back, whether it was of their own will, maybe not. Sometimes they got paid, sometimes they didn't. And would recreate their home environment in a place, like the World Fair. So the World's Fair in 1958 was the first World's Fair since the Cold War. Yeah. So all the countries were vying to show, hey, look how cool I am. We're so advanced.
Yeah.
And the theme was a new world view, a new humanism. And I said, wow, a new world view, a new humanism.
Yeah,
and yet you have people behind a fence and in mud, shooting a bow and arrow, showing that they could swim or reenacting colonial wars. How is that a new humanism?
Yeah.
How is that a new worldview?
I mean, and to them, they're thinking it's innovation. They're thinking this is, better than sliced bread, and not at the same time recognizing how it's dehumanizing,
absolutely
humiliating,
absolutely,
and just creating a rift, if you will, the beginning of that sort of superialism rift that you were talking about.
And believe it or not, Adolf Hitler condemned human zoos.
Really?
Right.
I guess I don't know if that I don't know if you rejoice over that, or I don't think you should.
Right, but I just again,
but
right? That's beguiling to me.
Yeah, that's totally.
You did what you did, but yet you condemn a human zoo. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, and just digging the under, that's a term that I've learned from just listening to old folks. Digging the under is when you're kind of exposing the history of the past, and especially when it involves other people and folks start to get uncomfortable when you start asking certain questions. How did you do all that research, especially since it was more German focused, if you will?
I did a lot of Googling, and there are some videos on human zoos. I think that what makes this story, and it's still in the film festival circuit, so it's not available for people to kind of just go to YouTube and look at, but I think what makes the story so compelling is that it's so obscure. I mean, we know about the horrors of the Holocaust. We understand that slavery was egregious. Yeah. But when it comes to human zoos, it's something that many of us haven't heard of. And it's absolutely, horrific to think that as late as 1958, that people were still on display and having a parade around naked. And it's just unthinkable, really. Yeah. And it speaks to people.
So did you recreate that whole scene in the movie? How did you take that concept and translate it into something that was interesting, and educating, and again had that emotional, concept to it as well?
I took a what if scenario. So I looked at the photo, and in the photo, the African girl was behind a fence, and she was being taunted as if one of the Europeans had something in their hand resembling some kind of food, as if to say, "Come here, come here, little monkey, and eat what I'm holding in my hand." Did you
have moments where you were sort of tearful as you were filming, or had you been desensitized since you were researching so much of it? Okay.
No, I don't for this particular project, I don't think desensitization, comes into play, because what really troubled me is that there were 2 photographers for the World Fair. And generally, you get bylines, right? This was shot by such and such, and this is such and such in the picture. And the little girl had no name. And it drove me absolutely nuts. Mm-hmm. She could very well still be alive today. And how would any of us know? And so when I wrote the script, all the characters were called what they were. There were no names. Because I said, if she doesn't have a name, then no one is going to have a name. So there's a German mother, German girl, zookeeper, ticket guy, but no one had a name. And I just wanted to kind of honor that with her. And because part of the no name is a part of the dehumanization that occurs, right? And if you look at what's been happening here lately, mm-hmm. all the violence that's been caught on camera, with people of color, men, mm-hmm. women, children, the senseless deaths, you ask yourself, how could someone do that? Mm-hmm. How could they do that to another person unless they don't see them as human? Yeah. So, the hashtag social media that I've been using with regard to the presence is let's all be human. Yeah. Because we are, right?
Yeah, and for the entire process with the film and script writing, how long did that take you? You don't have this book sort of thing to start with. It's all coming from what you perceive you want to convey. How long was that process, and how did that go?
Well, and I think that's a really good question, because for me, I didn't have any experience with script writing at the time when I saw the photo.
Did you take a class or something? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I knew immediately that I wanted this to be a film.
Sure.
And so, but I saw like a scroll unraveling in my mind, old scroll, parchment, with the script on it. So I knew exactly what I wanted. And I'm like, okay, this is a gift. I'm going to go ahead and run with this. So I ended up going to Costa Rica for a screenwriting competition. I'm sorry, screenwriting retreat. And, people can learn screenwriting several different ways, right? You can take a class, you can take an online course, you can here in the States. But that particular retreat caught my attention. And it's with Jacob Kruger out of New York, Jacob Kruger Studio, because it was extremely holistic. So you could wake up in the morning, you do yoga, you could go down to the ocean, clear your head. And then there were a series of courses, like hypnosis for writers. And primarily, they taught you how to kind of dig into your subconscious, because the subconscious doesn't know the difference between reality and dreams. Sure. And when it's all said and done, whatever scripts people write is really their subconscious speaking to them. All the characters are really you. And so if you kind of figure out how to dig deep and understand where that's coming from, then it makes your characters that much more believable and that much more relatable, because you know from whence it came. Wow. So I really I wrote the script there in Costa Rica, and that I saw the picture in March. I went to the screenwriting retreat in June, came back, assembled my crew, and we shot on October 18th and 19th of 2014. So from March till October, the process took place, and I had 10 drafts of it. But part of the process is trying to decide, not only with the imagery but music, right? And so music is was extremely important piece of the script process, because I almost didn't want to put any words or any dialogue. I wanted this music to be able to help tell this story, this heart-wrenching story of this little girl who's put out for the first time. And so Chelsea Green is a violinist, and I met her about a year before I saw the photo, and I stalked her and I begged her, please, Chelsea, I would love to have you score this film. And
scoring, can you describe that or explain that?
Yes. So for her, she took a look. So she ended up saying yes, but she took a look at the script, and she wrote to the script. She created and composed the music to the script, so that it actually lives. It just comes alive on screen with that, violin playing. And so, and I actually have some of the characters speaking different languages, because we had to recreate 1958. Yeah, how do you do that with like zero budget? Sure. And so much, and I just depended on friends, especially with set design, clothes, just to do research and say, what were people. Fortunately, the styles aren't that different. Yeah. you know, you may have had some cat glasses or the hairstyles may be different, but in overall,
Yeah.
you know, maybe long skirts and fitted shirts. So we were able to.
I mean, it wasn't Elizabethan, you know. It was,
correct.
You know, so
That would have been a
that'd
problem.
Been a stretch. That would have been a stretch.
Wardrobe, which is done by Kathy Eastman. She went to thrift shops, and I worked with a friend of mine named Phyllis who made the dresses. She would take a dress and then kind of repurpose it to fit the period and the time. So that worked out. Even with regard to a prop car. I was on the way to the gym one morning. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I saw a guy in a historic car, and I'm like,
yeah,
it would be perfect for the film. And he ended up driving, and I followed him. You got to be aggressive when you do these things. But so he ended up going to the gym parking lot, and when he got out, I said, sir, I know this is strange, but, and I told him my story, and he said, well, what year do you need the car for? I said, well, 1958. He said, well, I have a 1958 Mercedes-Benz in my garage. He collected cars.
Just sitting around, right?
And I said, gift.
Yes.
And I said, so we don't have much money. He didn't mind. He said, this is on me.
Wow.
I think you're telling something that's very important. And he came to set and watched it like a baby, made sure no one kind of scratched it or bumped into it. But it was just amazing because we wanted that. We started off in Berlin, Germany, and you know the a daughter and mother went to Brussels to the World Fair, so that was just perfect. And it was, again, I just think it was divine that things happen to fall in place because. And when I say prop car, I mean a car that is used for expressly to kind of. For the purpose of the film, in order to convey something. So it was 1958. We had a 1958 car.
Sure.
So we considered a prop. And she didn't drive it. So it was like a prop car.
I mean, and how big was the set?
I shot it in my backyard.
Okay.
So, we used everything. We used inside the house. We used outside of the house. We used the front yard. We used the lawn. We used the backyard. So,
so if you're listening and wondering, you know, where you're going to shoot your film,
use what's around you.
Yeah.
And, you know, even with regard to, say something, as I lived in a residential street, with regard to the parking. So my producer, Sabrina Gray, said, well, let me call the county and see if we can have people park at the elementary school to provide. There's just so many things to think about. And that's why, you know, there's no way. It really does take a village to, you know, raise a movie, so to speak.
I mean, and your movie went on to not do mediocre. I mean, you've been winning awards. I've lost count. You've been in, you know, various film festivals, and you said it's still on circuit now. How many awards have you actually won for this, and what do you think is next for the film?
Great questions. I actually thought the film would kind of peter out after the end of the first year, so I could focus on my next project.
Sure.
And that hasn't happened. Zoo has kind of taken on a life of its own, and I accept it. I just didn't see it, right? But internationally, it's won awards in Jakarta, Indonesia, a couple of awards there, and in Spain, in Marbella, Spain, there's a film festival called Independent Filmmaker Festival. And here in the United States, we've won in New York and here in Baltimore and Atlanta.
Wow.
It's been in LA. I mean, so it's been in several different, and even there are several film festivals that we didn't win, but everyone comes from it wanting to Google it and wanting to learn more about human zoos, and that's really what's important to me. And I think that it's transformative.
Sure.
I had a young man who worked on the set, and he said the gravity of it hit him while working on it. And he says, I don't know, all of us were changed after working on this film. And, you know, we were very jovial and upbeat, but the subject matter is so daunting that, you know, it does give you, you know, you do take a moment to pause.
Yeah.
So I think what's continuing to happen, that people are transformed and just, you know, really want the world to be a better place. And this does serve as a film of hope. You know, it educates you, but it also provides some hope.
Yeah. I mean, and just submitting your films to the festivals, there's a financial investment there.
Yes,
and then there's an investment, a financial investment, and time investment too, with actually getting to the festivals and all of the things that are required just to put things together and parcel it and get it out. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. To your point, it does take money, right? And I know there have been a lot of personal sacrifices that myself and people around have done in order for to continue to see Zoo Vorkashaw grow and flourish. So I would actually when I knew I was going to do the film, I just started saving like huge chunks of money from each paycheck, and just putting it aside, because I knew that production, with paying for the equipment and paying for the insurance and even paying to get some of the set made was going to cost. And we weren't SAG, so we didn't have to deal with any of those fees that come with using SAG actors. But yet and still, so you have the money for production, and then after you do principal photography, after you shoot the film, you got to get it edited, right? So there's money for editing, and then comes the film festival. So I was really fortunate as a first-time filmmaker to be able to submit. And a film festival can cost anywhere from $25 to even $100 if it's Cannes, right? You want to go to Cannes? Here's $100. And so, and it's almost kind of like throwing spaghetti on the wall to see if it sticks. But if you have a strategy, a film festival strategy, each film festival has a certain aesthetic. And sometimes you can find that out from looking at the descriptions. But oftentimes, if you do get accepted into a festival, it's just not in good taste not to go. So we sacrifice in order to go. And I think it's very helpful because you have an opportunity to build relationships with film festival directors and access that you may have to other actors. For example, the young lady who's going to star in Red Clay Dirt, I met her at another film festival. And we just bonded. You know, her name is Deirdre McDowell. She's my sister from another mister. But I'm like, you're my Sam Jackson. So as I grow, I want to bring her with me, like everything I do, because she's just so dynamic and she gets it. So I just think it, and that does cost, right? So, but you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And do I want to, is this, and you have to reconcile, I may never get this money back. Right. So I don't look at it as something that, I got to make, X amount of money back, or I just look at it as what kinds of opportunities can come from it, and the wonderful people that I've met along the way.
And with Zoo, would you do anything different?
You know what? I would probably, I would have one more day of shooting. As opposed to 2 days. We were shooting 3 days.
Why?
Because things happen on set, and as a director, you're pretty much there to kind of solve problems, but you have your team. Things just happen that are out of your control, and it takes time to rectify it. And we were depending on daylight. And so we literally ran out of daylight and it was very cold during that time period. And we're talking about a human zoo where with they just didn't have coats and stuff. We had African garb on. So I felt bad for the actors, but we had to keep taking breaks to make sure they were warm, they were comfortable. But but you have to be able to make the concessions. So for one of the scenes we shot was supposed to be daylight, but it was indoors. So the director of photography put white cardboard over the window so that it kind of looked as if it were daylight. So you have to be willing to kind of pivot and make those changes. But I would definitely get another day of shooting, just so that I could make sure I get everything I wanted. Because before you shoot, you got to do a shot list. I want this, I want this, I want this. And sometimes you got to say, you know what, can't shoot that. We don't have enough time. So how much would the project be sacrificed? But in the long run, people, they don't know what didn't get shot. They just know what they see. But you have to be able to make the best out of what you have when it's all said and done.
And you mentioned the editing process earlier. So when you're directing and then you get into that editing phase, are you tweaking until it's exactly the way you want it? Or are you kind of saying, let it be as is? What's your mindset when you're in that mode?
Well, the vision that you have for the film in your brain is one thing. When you write the screenplay, it becomes another thing. When you shoot it, it becomes another thing. And when you edit it, then that's when it becomes the thing. Right? So Zoo Vorkashaw has like 4 different iterations in terms of what I originally saw in my head to what is actually on the screen. But the script supervisor, the editor edited to the script supervisor's notes. And so for those who may not be familiar, the script supervisor is there every step of the way and takes notes and knows what scene needs to be shot when and where. And she gives the notes to the editor and he puts together a first cut. And so when I saw it, I was like, that's not what I envisioned.
How far off was it?
I would say we had 10 edits, But I literally went through every frame and took what they call time code, so I could tell the editor, this is what I want to put there. I went through every frame and reconstructed as much as I possibly could. I mean, she did an awesome job. But, you know, what I saw and what ended up being on screen were just two different things. And so I think when it was all said and done, we married the two and came up with a pretty nice product.
Wow. So then, you've taken us through what it was like to go through the zoo filmmaking process, and thank you for that. That was just so informative and educational. Now you're starting that process all over again with red clay dirt, and before you can actually start that process, you actually need some help.
Oh, absolutely.
You talked about your fundraising earlier.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that.
That little detail, that little detail. If you had, and you may have already created the schedule, but what is your ideal time to begin filming?
It depends on the fundraising.
I mean, ideally.
Ideally, well, I would like to shoot September. Okay. If I could.
Okay. So then talk to our audience and let them know exactly what they can do for you to help you bring this beautiful work of art to life, so we can see it as well. Because I'm gonna follow up with you and find out when we can get Zoo,
I know you will.
In front of me, so I can actually spend some time on it. But let's just let people know how they can help you with this next journey.
Okay, I appreciate that. So we've partnered with a fiscal sponsor, which is a nonprofit organization called From the Heart Productions. And they help aspiring filmmakers with creating a tax deduct. So if you contribute, your contribution would be tax deductible because they're a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. So with the website, they're working with an organization called Network for Good. So if you went to From the Heart Productions /Network for Good and look under Red Clay Dirt Film, you could find us there. You could find out all about the film, see who's acting in it, see what kind of perks you would get. We accept anything from $1 to, $100,000 if you have it. Hey,
sure. So, why not?
But definitely FromTheHeartProductions.com /Network for Good.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, for sharing with our audience. Please go out.
I have another gift for you.
You do?
Yeah. Well, I got another gift.
All right. Okay. I like this.
So part of so my production company is called Little Known Stories, and the purpose of it is to be able to tell these little known stories that are buried in the crevices of history's pages and bring them to life, in a purely organic way through a visual medium. And so for I gotta hold it up this way. So this right is so I'm all about community, right? And one of my friends has a t-shirt business, and all of his t-shirts have some kind of social message. His name is Ricky, and his company is called Nyla Elise, named after his daughter. So this shirt, Film is My Ammo, is his creation, but we've co-branded. So on the front is Film is My Ammo, and then on the back is Red Clay Dirt, Little Known Story. So this is one of the perks that you get when you contribute to the campaign. But I want to give this to you, Akia.
Thank you so much.
Yes, pink looks so nice on you, darling.
Thank you very much. I will wear it with pride.
Thank you.
Get your own t-shirt by supporting Monda. I mean, I hope you just go and find her on social media. You can find Monda Raquel Webb all over social. Reach out to her. Find out about her fundraising campaigns and how you can support this brilliant filmmaker, director, producer,
storyteller.
Tell
stories.
It all. Thank you so much for being here on Think Big with me, for thinking very big with me while we're on the show, for sharing your light. And I look forward to seeing so much more to come from you on the big screen and also in friendship.
Thank you so much.
You've been watching Think Big. I'm your host, Akia Garnett. We'll see you next time.